So now that we talked about how physical aggression can develop within a family unit, it's important for us to talk about how physical aggression manifests within a circle of friends and how friendships can really play a role in physical aggression. So in terms of friendship and aggression, it's important to understand that even if someone is at the worst genetic risk, even if their family is modeling the worst hostile coping techniques ever, we can find that the friend circle can play a major role. And so friends can actually work as moderators. Now there's lots of different ways we can focus on moderators, and how I want to do it for this is I kind of want to show that it's more like a choose your own adventure pathway. Imagine someone is at the genetic risk to develop a very high prevalence of physical aggression behaviors. But they have non-aggressive friends. If they have lots of non-aggressive friends in their life, they will tend to develop low aggression. Versus if someone has that genetic risk and they have aggressive friends, this is when they can develop high aggression. And so this would be a case of the diathesis stress model, where if they have both the genetic risk and they're exposed to aggressive friends, this is when we can predict the most negative outcomes. That being said, it can have a lot of diversity. We find that some kids that are showing high levels of aggressive behavior tend to experience peer rejection from the peer group. Their friends don't want them there, they get excluded, and they have a hard time fitting in. However, in other cases, we find kids that are highly aggressive actually find like-minded peers, and they find friends that are very similar to them, showing high levels of peer congruence. So we're going to take some time and talk about peer rejection and peer congruence. So in terms of peer rejection, basically what happens here is if someone is always intending to cause bodily harm to people or things, we don't like that. And so some of the earliest work by Coy and Dodge found that kids who show high levels of physical aggression early in early elementary tend to show higher levels of peer rejection in later elementary. Now, although the first work showed that it perhaps could be causal like that, later works have also found the inverse. They found kids that were rejected through no fault of their own in early elementary would go on to develop more physical aggression as a coping mechanism in later elementary. So it can certainly be a bi-directional effect, leading us to the chicken and egg problem. We don't really know which one always has to come first, or perhaps they are so interrelated it doesn't matter which one comes first. Peer rejection can cause a child to develop aggression, and aggression can cause a child to be rejected from peers. But what we do know is most people don't like being hurt, and so they will reject that person from the peer group. Of course, the exception to this is when someone who's high in physical aggression makes friends with other people who are high in physical aggression. And then you have this aggressive friends group. Again, I'm using superheroes to model this. They are very aggressive people, even if it is pro-social aggression, and they would have a hard time getting along with peace activists, let's say, but they fall in line with themselves. And there's 4 subcomponents that can explain how this peer congruence works and why aggressive kids are going to make friends with other aggressive kids. The first one is what we call behavioral homophily, and this is the idea that we like the same behaviors. Phily is love, homo is like, we like the same behaviors. So this is the idea that most people will reject you if you're high in physical aggression, except the other people that are also high in physical aggression. Instead, they're going to validate you. They're going to say, hey, that makes sense to me. Your response seems totally logical to me. I would have done that too. So they get along. They see things eye to eye, and they will encourage the physical aggression to maintain in each other. So they have each other's back. And so we know that people that have similar interests will form friendships. This makes sense to us. And so this is just one example of that. They have common interests, so they'll get along. But it's not just about their common interests. Another component of why you may see a physically aggressive friends group is that they don't just share interests, they share social status. And so social status similarity is the idea it might be a circle of outcasts or a circle of survivors or people that grew up on the wrong side of the tracks or the hard side of town. They might have experienced similar trauma or similar negative home environments, and the other kids just can't understand them. This is the idea that when multiple people who are displaying highly aggressive behaviors are rejected, those multiple people that are rejected will pair up together. Now, what's really interesting is if you've ever read into the history of pirates and pirate ships, a lot of pirates may have been escaped fugitives or escaped people that were outlawed, and they bonded together and formed the Pirates Code. And so this is the idea that they were highly aggressive people who bonded together because of their social status. A third component that helps us to explain highly aggressive friend groups is the notion of deviancy training. what we find is if a person who has only done some minimally deviant things, such as maybe pushing or causing a couple fights at school, once they get rejected from the peer group and they're hanging out with people with the same social status, they may begin to get mentored into more deviant behaviors. And so they may be mentored into making false IDs, or doing identification theft, using substances, causing vandalism and graffiti, breaking and entering, or property damage. And so we start to see this mentoring and this skills development start to happen. Aside from these physical things, we can also see with people intending or threatening to cause harm, we can see the radicalization. And we can see this is how someone who hopes to cause harm or idolizes about causing harm, they could be further radicalized and trained from others who have the similar social status to them. So this would be a third component explaining the physically aggressive friend group. And the fourth component we'll talk about is the notion of coercion or peer pressure. And this can work as an initiation or hazing ritual. So it's the idea that in order to be included in the highly aggressive friends group, they have to do something to prove that they are worthy of it, that they are aggressive enough. So that's going to make them become more aggressive right from the outset. Then once they're in the group, they might need to maintain a certain level of aggressive behavior in order to maintain their membership within the group. We may see this a lot in terms of military groups or paramilitary groups. We may see this in any groups that have a rigid hierarchy and a leader. If there's gangs or if there's mobs or mafia groups, there is some sort of initiation and coercion. But even in more just schoolyard aggressive groups, there may be this sort of you have to earn it or prove it that you belong. And then once you're in the group, it's the idea that you encourage other group members to be aggressive like you. So because of this, we see the highly aggressive friends groups become more and more and more aggressive the longer they stay together.